In this session, we will discuss about implementation in atomic transactions. If each process executing a transaction just updates the object it uses in place, then the transaction will not be atomic, and changes will not vanish magically if the transaction aborts. Also, the results of running multiple transactions will not be serializable either. This means some kind of implementation method must be in place. We start our discussion with private workspace. Now, when a process starts a transaction, it is given a private workspace containing all the files to which it has access. Now, until the transaction either commits or aborts, all of its read operations and write operations go to the private workspace rather than the real one. Now, when we say real, it means the normal file system. Now, we'll look at the first implementation method, that is used for reading. Now, the first step is when a process reads a file. Now, when it reads a file, it does not require to modify the copy. So, in this case, there is no need of a private copy. When a process starts a transaction, it is sufficient to create a private workspace for it that is empty, except for a pointer back to its parent's workspace. When the process opens a file for reading, the back pointers are followed until the file is located in the parent's workspace. Now, this was with respect to reading. Now, we'll see with respect to writing. So, when a file is opened for writing, it can be located in the same way as it is done for the reading process. But now, this particular file has to be first copied to a private workspace. Instead of copying the entire file, only the file index is copied into the private workspace. The index is nothing but the block of data that is associated with each file, which tells the location of the disk blocks. Now, using this private index, the file can be read in the usual way, since the disk address it contains are for the original disk blocks. When a file block is first modified, a copy of the block is made and the address of the copy inserted into the index. The block can then be updated without affecting the original one. Similarly, the appended blocks are also handled. The new blocks are called as shadow blocks. We will see an example of this. Now, in this figure, we can see a file index and the disk blocks are. So, this index tells the location of the disk blocks on the disk. Now, when a process wants to work on certain disk blocks, it makes use of this private workspace. Now, in this private workspace, the same index, the contents of the index are being copied into the private space. So, instead of copying the entire file, only the file index is copied into the private workspace. So, in this private workspace, we have index 0, index 1 and index 2. So, this index in the private workspace also points to the exact or the original disk block. Now, using this private index, the files can be read in the usual way, since this addresses, the address it contains, are of the original disk blocks. So, this 0 points to block 0, 1 points to block 1 and 2 points to block 2. This is with respect to the private workspace. Whereas in the original, index also points to the same location. Index 0 points to block 0 index 1 points to block 1 and index 2 points to block 2. Now let's make an assumption that in the private workspace this particular process has updated the block 0. So when a file block is first modified, a copy of that block is made and the address of the copy is inserted into the index. So here we have disk block 0. Now this disk block 0 is updated. So we have named it as 0 dash. Now the pointer from the private workspace points to the modified disk block. Similarly, there is an addition of new disk block, that is 3 dash. So that also points to this location in the disk. So basically this is a new block which is appended in the private space. So you can see the other processes, when they are making use of disk block 0, they are referring to this particular disk block and not the modified one. The modified one is only accessible to this particular process which is working on those disk blocks. So as I mentioned, the process running the transaction sees the modified file, but all the other processes continue to see the original one. So when I say index 0, it points to this particular file, that is the original file. Index 1 points to this particular block, index 2 points to this particular block. Whereas with respect to the private space, 0 dash is the modified version of this particular block and it points to the modified version of disk block. And this 3 dash is the new disk block that has been appended. So finally, after committing, if everything goes well and the transaction is committed, then this index, 0 index, which was pointed at this particular location, is now pointing at the updated location. Similarly, the new appended index is pointing to the new disk. So after committing, the private indices are moved into the parent's workspace automatically. Now the next method is called as the write head log, also known as intention list. So this is a common method which is used for implementing transactions. Now with this method, files are actually modified in place, but before any block is changed, a record is written to something called as a write head log, which is nothing but a stable storage. Okay. Now in this write head log, it makes a note which transaction is making the change, which file and block is being updated, and what are the old values and what are the new values. Only after the log has been written successfully, the change is being made to the file. We'll see an example of this. Now we have a simple transaction over here that uses two shared variables, x and y. Both are initialized to 0. For each of the three statements inside the transaction, a log record is written before executing the statement, giving the old values and the new values separated by a slash. Let's have a look at it. Now here, when the transaction begins, with respect to the first statement, x equals to x plus 1, whereas this information about this particular statement is mentioned in the log. So the log record for the first statement is the old value of x is 0 and the new value of x is 1. So this is new value, this is old value. When we move towards the next statement, the log record for the next statement will be appended to the log record. Okay. So here it shows the old value of y and the new value of y. So the old value of y is 0. So 0 plus 2 is 2. So the new value of y is 2. Similarly, with respect to the last statement, the log record with respect to the last statement, where we are updating the value of x. So the old value of x we know is 1. And then we multiply the value of y, that is 2 into 2. So the new value of x now is 4. So basically this is the old value in the log and the new value in the log. Now if a transaction aborts, the log can be used to back up the original state, starting at the end and going in the backward direction. So each log record is read and the change described in it is undone. And this particular process is called as rollback. The next phase is the two-phase commit protocol. So now in a distributed system, the commit may require the cooperation of multiple processes on different machines, each of which holds some of the variables, files, and databases and other objects which are changed by the transaction. So we'll try and understand how this two-phase commit protocol works in a distributed system. The name two-phase protocol itself tells us that this entire protocol works in two phases, that is phase 1 and phase 2. So as we know, in a distributed system there will be one coordinator and the other processes will be working as subordinates. So we have a coordinator and we have a subordinate. So now we will discuss only about phase 1. In phase 1, what happens is the commit protocol begins when the coordinator writes a log entry saying that it is starting the commit protocol, following by sending each of the subordinates a message telling them to be prepared to commit. So what does the coordinator do is makes a message called as prepare and writes this information into the log and sends it to all the other subordinates, asking them to be prepared to commit. Now when the subordinate gets this message, it checks to see if it is ready to commit, and if it is ready, it makes a log entry and sends back its decision to the coordinator. So now in this case, it will be, in case it is ready to commit, it will send write a ready message in the log and send this message to the coordinator. Now when the coordinator has received all the responses, it knows whether to commit the transaction or to abort. If all the subordinates, that means all the processes are prepared to commit, the transaction is committed. Even if one is not able to commit, then the entire transaction is aborted. So it collects all the replies. Now we move with phase 2 of two-phase commit protocol. So after collecting all the replies, we start with the phase 2. Now the coordinator will again write into the log record and send a commit message to all the subordinates. So basically it is passing its decision to all the subordinates. To this, the subordinates update their log record by writing commit and sending a finished message to the coordinator. Now what happens if a coordinator crashes? If the coordinator crashes after having written the initial log record, upon recovery it can just continue where it had left, repeating the initial message if needed. Whereas if it crashes after having written the result of the vote to the log, upon recovery it can just re-inform the subordinates of the result. Now this was in case the coordinator crashes. What if the subordinate crashes? If a subordinate crashes before having replied to the first message, then the coordinator will keep sending its message until it gives up. If it crashes later, it can see from the log where it was and thus what it must do.